Today, the Union-Tribune Editorial Board is joined by Amy Reichert, a candidate for County Supervisor District 4. Amy, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you.
And you obviously were a candidate last time around. We talked to you a couple times. You were in the runoff with the incumbent who has since left office. Tell us why you want the job this year and what's changed since 2022 for you.
In 2022, I felt called. I felt that it was my duty to run against Nathan Fletcher, who has now since resigned. I felt that I needed to personally step up and challenge him to protect San Diego from his failed policies and, quite honestly, his divisive behavior, especially towards his own constituents. And this year, I discovered my why on May 2nd. That was at the San Diego County Board of Supervisors meeting. And that was the meeting where the Board of Supervisors was going to decide by a vote if the seat was going to be vacated with a special election or an appointment. And there was so much commotion going on in the chambers that day. There were over 100 people there, mostly there to say that they wanted a special election. And I remember it was just minutes before the vote. And I looked toward the back of the chambers, and there was a mom sitting there with 4 small kids. And I felt drawn to her. And I went over to her and I introduced myself. And as we began to talk, I found out that she was about to lose her housing in 19 days. And I just said, I am so glad that I met you. I want to help you. Well, let me tell you, I spent the next several days dealing with bureaucracy and trying to help her get shelter for her and her 4 kids. And it was heartbreaking and eye-opening. And it renewed my why, that the county government just simply isn't working for San Diegans. By every metric, San Diego is declining. And that's why I feel that my vision and my path for San Diego will take us in a better direction.
Well, and because you mentioned Nathan right there, one of the things in the last campaign that he criticized you on pretty heavily was COVID-19, how you and your group Reopen San Diego reacted in that time, how it ran counter to the way that he saw the county through the pandemic. What looking back on that moment, what do you think of how you and Reopen handled the pandemic? Did you do everything the right way? Were there some lessons learned for you and some missteps that organization and that you might have had, or walk us through your thoughts on that now that it's been a little bit of time since that was at its peak?
Absolutely. Last week, I went to a forum in Hillcrest and all the candidates were there, and it was such an amazing experience. It was at Rich's, and Rich's has been in the community for nearly 30 years. And I had a chance to speak with the manager, the facility manager, the bartenders, and they told me what it was like going through the pandemic. And during the summer of 2020, what Rich's actually did was they turned their parking lot into a patio. And they started creating a safe place for the community to come and have lunch at Rich's. And that's what Reopen San Diego did. We met outdoors. We invited people from the arts community. We had musicians come. It was a safe place outdoors. We had markets where we had artists who could sell things as well as small businesses. Now, as things went on in November of 2021, that's when a group of 250 police officers, San Diego City police officers, came to us and asked us to do a press conference. Because 3 weeks before Christmas, Mayor Todd Gloria was going to fire all city workers and not give them a religious exemption process. So as we know now, that is contrary to the 1964 Civil Rights Act, Title VII. And I'm so glad that through our efforts, we were able to save 2,000 city workers from getting terminated. And just this year, and I want to thank the San Diego Union-Tribune for publishing an op-ed, and it was Dr. Tracy Kaiser. She is a Black woman. She was pregnant at the time with the high-risk pregnancy, and the San Diego Community College District wanted to terminate her. And thank you for publishing her op-ed. And I'm just so happy because of our efforts, we were able to not only save her job, but the job of 50 other professors, as well as get 3 workers that were fired reinstated. You know, one of the things we always tried to lead with was we were a nonpartisan group, a non-religious group. We always encouraged people to go to the Board of Supervisors and be civil and professional. I myself always led by that example. In fact, I would bring my then 9-year-old son with me at the time. So I realized that there were other people in the community that perhaps did not act the best at the Board of Supervisors, but I can tell you that they are not part of what we did in our mission at Reopen. In fact, we have openly denounced that kind of behavior at County Board of Supervisors meeting. So at the end of the day, I hope people will realize that we made history, because in Los Angeles and New York City, police and fire did get terminated. And right now, what we're seeing is so many lawsuits. And in New York City, they were forced to rehire those people. So we saved them from ever getting fired, and we saved the city of San Diego hundreds of thousands of dollars in lawsuits. And I'm very proud that we were able to do that.
I'm going to say a follow-up kind of more broadly, more philosophically on that issue. What happened during COVID was a great example of how people saw things differently, you know, and their view of the public's wants and the public's needs didn't match other sectors' views of public want and public needs. And now we're seeing that these kind of divisiveness and public fights play out in climate policy, vehicle charging infrastructure, housing, transit. How are you as a supervisor, how would you as a supervisor manage that these conflicts, these disputes between needs and wants when people don't see eye to eye?
I love this question so much. And what I've been doing during this campaign is I've been showing up in places that, quite honestly, they would not expect somebody who is the endorsed Republican in the race to show up. I can tell you, when we had the forum in Hillcrest and Bella was there, she saw there were 130 people there from the community. And over half of the people there were supporters of mine. And many of the supporters are members of the gay community, and they were there to support me. And the fact of the matter is, there were misconceptions about who I am, what I believe in bringing the community together and creating a safe conversation for everybody to have. Is that people were saying, oh, Amy Reichert's not even going to show up. But I showed up an hour early, and I met every single person who walked into Rich's that night for the Hillcrest Forum. And I'm going to keep showing up. The same thing was said last week at the public defender's endorsement meeting. They said, you know what? We've had Republicans that have just flat out refused to even show up for an endorsement meeting. And I shared with them my experience of being a state licensed investigator and how I've worked tirelessly on criminal defense matters, and how I believe that public defenders should be paid the same amount of money as the prosecutors that are standing in that same courtroom. And so at the end of the day, what I hope people hear is I have a heart to serve, I have a heart to listen, and I want to bring people together. The whole culture wars and divisiveness, it's so 2020. Let's move on and let's bring people together.
I'm going to pass the mic to my teammates here for more specific issues, but a follow-up to that. What do you attribute the misconceptions to, as you I think that was the word that you used? Why do those continue to be out there?
You know, you know what? Some of it is the fault of Republicans themselves, right? And the kind of things that are said on social media. And then some of it also comes from really the tone, for example, that Nathan Fletcher set in his campaign against me. He called me every name in the book. In fact, it was published in the San Diego Union-Tribune. He referred to me as a right-wing climate denier extremist. I know that's a mouthful, but it's these kind of name calling really that just is leading to some of these misconceptions. And believe me, Republicans do it, Democrats do it. It's not just one side or the other. So here's how I'm leading. During the very first community forum, I turned to my fellow candidates and I said, I give you my promise, my word. I will never, ever name call you ever. And that's something I stuck to last year. And it's something that I stick to this year too.
Oh, just real quick, because you brought up the climate denialism line that Nathan used against you. We asked you about that point blank. You said that you do believe in climate, that you trust the science, and you talk about your son pursuing a career in the environmental field. Is that something you're still having to bat back? Do people still look at some of your positions and some of your statements and see problem signs, warning signs about how you might approach science?
I don't think so at all. In fact, the groups that I've been going to, and I've been going to different environmental groups as well. And in fact, I just went to the League of Conservation Voters and I said, I am your candidate. You want to endorse me because I can speak to a different audience than the one that you're used to speaking to. And the fact of the matter is, we do need to embrace that humans are having an impact on our environment, and we need to act on the city level, the county level, and the state level and the federal level. So I believe in that. Now, that being said, I am going to say that I believe that we should be doing this through incentives rather than more taxes. And so I know this is not going to be popular to say, but I am against the mileage tax. I am very, very concerned that the mileage tax is going to disproportionately hurt middle class, working class, marginalized communities, people who, through no fault of their own, live in the farthest reaches of the county because it's more affordable and they have to travel more. I would really like to explore ways that we can act on climate change right now and make a difference right now. In fact, at a League of Women Voters forum on Saturday, one of my proposals is, how can we incentivize on a county level right now more remote working? I myself have worked remotely for the past 8 years. So I believe that is something that we can do right now.
Thanks. And thanks for keeping your answers relatively brief too. There's a lot of ground to cover in only a little bit of time. So I
Yes,
appreciate that.
absolutely.
I wanted to jump in with some questions about homelessness. It seems like one of the increasing issues on this issue is that different municipalities are disagreeing with each other and having different approaches. But as we know, homelessness doesn't know borders. It's a regional issue that we're all dealing with. So I want to know, how will you foster more regional collaboration in this position on homelessness and just other issues in general?
Yes, to answer your question directly, I think how we can handle this on a regional level, we learned lessons by having the convention center open for homeless people during the pandemic. And although that was very controversial, what we learned is we need a centralized triage center for homelessness. So I particularly like what Bill Walton is proposing, which is Sunbreak Ranch, which is to create a triage center that also has nonprofits where people can come, get temporary shelter, and then get the long-term solutions that they need. And I know that this problem is multifaceted and complex, and there's many different layers. There's the layer of affordable housing, and we need to do a better job caring for domestic violence victims, foster care youth who've aged out of the system, our elderly, our disabled, our LGBTQ youth who are thrown out of their homes and they have no place to go. We need to do a better job on that. However, we also need to realize that there is an intersection of homelessness, crime, mental illness, and severe addiction. And I've shared my story with you previously that my background is in recovery and treatment, and I've helped thousands of people do that. I believe that this is an area of neglect. And also, I know local hospital leaders at Scripps also believe that we have a huge deficit in recovery and treatment. And so I would support that.
So kind of on that topic, I wonder how you feel about the housing first versus, requiring services in order to receive assistance. I imagine that that'll be a big hurdle for a lot of people that could keep them away from seeking such assistance. So I wonder where you stand on that.
I think that Housing First has some good things about it, and it has been able to help some people. However, as we all know, housing takes time to build. It can take as much as 4 years to build. And so in the meantime, what we've seen is more unsheltered people on the streets. And again, we have to go back to, we have to address it on two different levels. Yes, there's the affordable housing root cause of homelessness, but there is also another root cause of homelessness, which is severe mental illness and addiction. And so one of the things that Housing First does not allow is for its funds to be used for treatment and recovery. And people desperately need treatment and recovery right now. And I'd like to see more resources towards our escalating mental illness crisis, as well as our severe addiction crisis, where people are dying of fentanyl overdoses.
Okay, I have one more question. I want to pivot to the transgender community. This is a community that's facing increasing threats, not just in San Diego County, but across the nation. And I wonder, are you exactly doing to support this group? And is there anything that the county should be doing on this issue that it isn't right now?
Well, Sandag just released the numbers, and the alarm bells should be going off for everybody right now, because hate crimes are up by 9% in San Diego County. So we have to protect our LGBTQ community and our trans community. And Gina Roberts, she is a commissioner for San Diego County for the Human Rights Commission, and she has endorsed me. And one of the things I was just telling Gina just the past week is that I consider her a sister. And so she's really been somebody that I've gone to for perspective and how we can bring communities together instead of just this name calling that's going on. It's ugly. And I think that's what it's going to take. It's going to take bringing people together from different sides of the issue and ending this culture war. It's just ridiculous. And so that's the way that I've led. And I'm really grateful that Gina has endorsed me for county supervisor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Amy, I want to talk to you about public transportation. When was the last time that you used public transportation in San Diego? What are you driving currently? And what are your thoughts on that? How can we get better? Or how can we make San Diegans use more public transportation?
I love this question. On Saturday at the League of Women Voters, there was a question from the audience. When was the last time you took the trolley down to the border? And so what I did was, and it was a room filled with about 150 people. I said, by a show of hands, how many of you take public transportation 5 times a week? And only one out of the entire room raised their hands. So I don't have to go on here and explain why people are not taking public transportation. There's the convenience level. I mean, from where most people live, San Diego is a pretty hilly place to live. In my district, I am a former single mom myself, and there's a lot of single moms in District 4. And so I can remember the days when I worked weekends and the buses were not available to where I worked on the weekends. I had a 6-year-old son at the time, which also made it very unsafe for me to be walking at night with him. And so one of the things that I have proposed is last mile connectivity. And this was something that I thought of in my travels in South America. They have something in Peru called combis. And these are smaller, more maneuverable vehicles that go in and out of vehicles. So I believe that we can do something that's app-based, that's more shuttle-based, to bring people to the major hubs of transportation. As far as what I drive, we just received an inheritance from my great aunt of a 2013 Acura MDX with only 40,000 miles on it. And so I'm very grateful for that. And then the last time that I took public transportation, and I think most San Diegans would say the same answer, was to a Padres game. That seems to be the most frequent use for our trolley system, which is wonderful, but we have such a long way to go to make public transportation a viable option for most people.
Thank you. And you just mentioned the border, so let's get to the border issues.
Yes.
I know that the district that you are trying to represent doesn't has a border there, but our county does. So I want to know about the border issues that you see right now, or the issues on the border area that you see that need attention from the county the most. How would you work on that?
So with San Diego being right at the most busy border crossing in the United States, I'm well aware, because I have traveled quite extensively in Baja California. I think I shared this with you last time. I played soccer every Sunday at Football Rapido Tijuana. And so I know about our border issue, but beyond that, I have family members who have also been dealing with our broken system right now. The father of my oldest son is an immigrant himself. He came to this country when he was 8 years old from South America, from Peru. And so hearing from other family members just being in limbo and not having that pathway to citizenship, it's not a county issue, but it is a county issue. And so that is something that I expressed during the last interview. We need to fix that. We need to give people a path to citizenship. I think it's cruel and inhumane to keep people in limbo. Now, there's other issues, though, that we have to face at the border. For example, we have a real crisis in San Diego County with housing. And so I have a lot of friends who live in Tijuana because it's cheaper. We have teachers, healthcare workers, people who serve the people of San Diego, and yet they live in Tijuana because it's cheaper there. And so we have an affordable issue, affordable housing issues, and it's also causing an environmental issue, because if you're stuck at the border, right, waiting to cross, well, those are emissions that are going into our environment. Thirdly, what I want to address is our fentanyl crisis, with fentanyl pouring over our border. Again, this is not a county issue, and yet it is an issue facing our county. So we have to face it regionally, on a federal level, state level, and local level. And that is something, again, because of my heart for treatment and recovery, that would be one of my first priorities in the first 100 days. People are dying in record numbers from fentanyl overdoses.
Okay, Amy, so my third question would be for the people in your district that cannot vote, either immigrants or refugees. I know that District 4 has a lot of diversity. So what would be your message for those folks that either work, live in District 4, but cannot vote?
I would say that, right now we have in District 4, we have hundreds of thousands of people from the Latino community. And I am one of those people, hablo un poco de español. And I think it's really, really important that the next district supervisor have someone in a high-level position that will represent and listen to the Latino community, a Spanish speaker. And so even though I am not bilingual, I am conversant in Spanish, I would make sure that the Latino population in San Diego would have somebody in my office who is constantly there with the door open, out at community events, including myself, listening to the concerns of the community. We didn't have that with our last supervisor, and we need it right now.
Amy, you kind of touched on some of what I'm going to ask you, but I'm hoping you might mention some other things. You'll be voting on issues outside of your district, issues that are of concern in the county that are outside of your district. So what do you see as some of those bigger needs? If you go north, if you go to the beach, if you go east, you touched a little bit on South County, but I don't know if there's other issues you want to raise.
Absolutely. I mean, when you look at San Diego as a whole, we don't just have microclimates, we have microcommunities. And even within District 4, District 4 is the most diverse community district in the entire county. And so there are different needs. The unincorporated parts of the county have different needs than, say, Balboa Park or North County. There's the agricultural community. So here's what I can say to that question is that what we really need at the County Board of Supervisors is to bring down the partisanship, dare I say, the hyper partisanship that's been going on at the Board of Supervisors. So all I can really say is to anybody who's watching now and to the board that's here, I give you my word that I will not be partisan in my approach, that I will be people-oriented. If you look at the org chart for the County of San Diego, it is the people that are at the top, then the Board of Supervisors. If you ask anybody, Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, no party preference, if that's the way the county has been and how they've experienced life in San Diego County, they would say no, that it's been a very top-down approach. I want to return people to the top.
Thank you.
I'll jump in here with a question about the community reinvestment fund grants that were recently changed, the policies for that. The board recently voted to allow staff to review these instead of going to the public. You just mentioned, the public should be at the top of the org chart. Does this sound like the kind of thing that the board should have done? Is this the kind of transparency that we should be expecting from the Board of Supervisors?
I would have voted no on that as a county board of supervisor. The goals of the county are transparency, openness, and community engagement. And anytime you take away the public's right to comment, I'm very, very concerned about. And then we could just go into, are these grants going to continually just go to the special interests? It's not going to really open up the opportunity for people to address the Board of Supervisors over this concern. Let's face it, staff members are pretty hard to reach, but it's a lot easier to reach a Board of Supervisor if you get a chance to speak at a Board of Supervisors meeting. So I would have voted no on that.
And the Board of Supervisors has been pretty fiscally conservative throughout its history until very recently, protecting its credit rating and its reserves. That's changed quite a bit. Where do you come down on the spectrum of conserving money or spending money?
Thank you. So you have to look at the state, which has a $96 billion deficit, and the county relies on half of its funds from the state and federal government. Then you look to the city of San Diego, and the city of San Diego has a $535 million deficit. Now, right now, the county has reserves. And right now, what we're seeing is economists are starting to ring the alarm bells that we could be facing an economic downturn. So I believe that it's sensible that we go through these times conservatively, fiscally. I do not believe that we should blow through that. I mean, we saw how the state in just a year went from a surplus to a deficit. People were saying, hey, return some of this surplus to the people. And instead, just a year later, are things any better than they were a couple of years ago? Now that we're facing almost $100 billion deficit, I would say not. So I would say that we need to navigate through these times with caution and, yes, continue to conserve.
I'll ask a couple questions now. Hi, Amy. The
Hi.
county jails have been so wrong, so many problems for so many years. The county board of supervisors have never used their power over the budget to try to force change. We don't have the same sheriff now. We have a new sheriff, and in recent weeks, things seem to be getting better. But how would you have dealt with this if you were on the board over the last term? Would you have been one of those who said, we can't tolerate the status quo with county jails, we need to try to force the sheriff to do better, or he's an elected official, so he should get some autonomy?
So I've been following this issue very closely for over a year now. In fact, I've reached out to Dave Myers, and we had coffee right here in La Mesa and talked about this issue specifically for about 2 hours. And I continue to stay in contact with him regarding this issue. I'm also aware of a current hunger strike at our jails and our detention facilities down near the border. What's happened in our jails is completely unacceptable. This year, 8 people have died in custody. Last year, it was 20. It's gotten so bad that there's been grand juries and there's been state audits. And bottom line issue is people who are struggling with severe mental illness are being put in situations where they are committing suicide or they're being killed, or people who are struggling with severe addictions are winding up overdosing in our jails. I support screening everybody that comes into our jails. But here's another thing that I will also suggest for our jails. Our jails were simply not built to help people who are severely mentally ill. They weren't built for it. They're not staffed for it. So I'd like to see some diversion. Last April, 30% of the people who were in custody were on psychotropic medications. So I believe that what we can do is people who are experiencing a mental health crisis need to be diverted. And here's the thing, to get help, it's going to mean a locked bed facility, and it's going to mean some long-term treatment, but jails are no place for people who are struggling with severe mental illness and drug addiction. To finish up your question too, there's another piece that I absolutely must mention. Our jails are woefully understaffed. Right now, our sheriff's deputies are working 16 to 18 hours of overtime every single week. They're being forced to work on their days off, and it's leading to people retiring early, and we need to address this immediately. So I do see on one hand how we can help people who are struggling with mental illness and severe addiction, but we also need to step in and also care for the people who are staffing our jails and their mental health. We need to provide them with more resources, and we need to make sure that our jails are fully staffed.
On my next question, that has to do with the border sewage issue. County supervisors in the last 3 weeks have kind of come out of their slumber and done something the editorial board has recommended for years, which is pushing for a federal emergency. However, we're already seeing signs that Joe Biden and Gavin Newsom are uninterested in this. How can San Diego County, how can they unite to try to get federal and state attention on this for such an enormous problem that does not seem to register in Washington, D.C. and to some extent with the governor?
Absolutely. So it was an absolutely great move by the San Diego County Board of Supervisors to call this issue a crisis. And I'm a longtime San Diegan. I can remember the days of Congressman Brian Bilbray driving a bulldozer on the beaches of Imperial Beach. And of course, what we've seen is the situation has not gotten any better. It's just gotten worse, and it's led to beach closures. It's hurt our tourism. It's hurt our environment. And so as a county board of supervisor, you can absolutely count on me not to accept the status quo. In fact, I think all of you have seen how I've not accepted the status quo and how we need to step up. We need to get Gavin Newsom's attention on this. We need to get our President Joe Biden's attention on this. It's going to take a local, state, and federal united effort to deal with this. And we're also going to need the help of Mexico as well.
Thank you.
So what would you do differently, Amy?
Well, I just had a very interesting conversation at a forum, and it was someone who is from Oaxaca, and he was involved in human trafficking. And he told me of some of the horrors that he experienced in that situation as being a victim. And what he shared with me was, if being in Mexico, that there really is no safety net. And these are his words, not mine. He said, if you don't work, you don't eat if you live in Mexico. So we know that Mexico is struggling economically, and they may not have the resources to fix this problem. So I believe that we're going to have to step up with federal money and to make sure that situation is fixed in Tijuana. Unfortunately, yes, it is going to take our taxpayer money, but what other alternative do we have?
Can I ask a follow-up on, you said the board is very hyper-partisan now, and I know that was a concern or a worry some people had when Fletcher left, but it seems like the board passed a budget and they voted unanimously on the funding issue Andrew brought up. It seems like it really hasn't been excessively partisan when it really had a chance to break down, honestly, and the wheels of government stop grinding. So I guess my question to you is what specifically do you see as hyper partisan there?
What I'm referring to is some of the unprofessional conduct of Board of Supervisors. And this is something that I've tried really hard to get the attention of the San Diego Union-Tribune. And one of the things that former Supervisor Nathan Fletcher posted on social media was he referred to people in the Republican Party as being in a deranged cult. That has no place coming from a public leader. And this is the kind of climate that I'm asking for all our Board of Supervisors. Treat your constituents, regardless of their political party, with respect. So that's just one example that I think was really, really hurtful that came from Nathan Fletcher, and it was terribly disappointing. So
the hyperpartisanship is from Nathan Fletcher, not from the remaining 4 supervisors, or am I misunderstanding? Is it, or are you just pointing the finger at Nathan, or are you broadly pointing it at the 4 remaining, all of the 4 remaining supervisors?
He was the chair of the Board of Supervisors, and so, that's one of the reasons, and I ran against him, so I'm pointing to his specific behavior. It was really cool. I went to a meeting, it was APAC in Mira Mesa, and Nora Vargas was there. And I asked someone to introduce me to her. And I introduced myself to her. She knew who I was. And I said, we haven't seen eye to eye over some of the issues over the past couple of years. But I just want to let you know that as a woman, I respect your leadership. And I think that's what it's going to take. It's going to take people who are willing to reach across the aisle and build those kind of relationships and lead with treating other people with dignity and respect. And that's some of the things that we just haven't seen. So I'm not laying blame all on the Board of Supervisors. There's plenty of blame to go around. But here's the thing, it starts with leadership. So let's have leadership that doesn't say these kind of things on social media that really have no place for someone who's representing others.
Thank you for that clarification. A couple other quick follow-up questions from me. You part of your first and last mile solution is a bus of some sort of kind of like Fred. Are you familiar with Fred downtown? Which is super heavily subsidized. Tons of money pours into that. Not a lot of people use it. So I'm wondering, how would you avoid that in your scenario? How would you get something that is, or is that not a concern of yours, that it be sustaining, that it be not a money drain?
Absolutely. We have to keep an eye on that because right now, as we all know, on this Zoom, public transportation is highly subsidized. So what I would believe in doing is starting with a pilot program and seeing if it works. That's all we can really do. So I wouldn't suggest rolling something out at scale, but rather trying it out as a pilot program.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then I also wanted to ask you a question about housing, obviously a huge issue. Do you know which specific areas, either generally or specifically, you would put housing, you would try to build new housing within your district? And can you tell us where those are?
Yes. So as we all know, the population of San Diego has declined by 50,000. Everybody on this call has a friend, loved one, or family member who has left the state. We've all heard how one of the main reasons people are leaving is so they can afford a single family home. One of the things that's happened is a lot of growth has happened in southern Riverside County, Temecula to be specific. And so that has severely hurt our environment with emissions and traffic jams on the 15. So what I am suggesting is, with the environment in mind, of course, with sensible, smart growth, there are areas in our unincorporated part of the county, in the eastern part, and also there are areas in southeastern part of the county that we can build communities for everybody. But here's the thing, and why I'm so concerned about SB 10. SB 10 bulldozes existing single-family homes. Well, with the stock of single-family homes going down and no building going up, all that does is raise the cost of a single-family home. What's being built in its place are these dense apartment buildings that are for rent. They're not for sale. So I would be in favor of multi-purpose use homes that are being built in our eastern part and our southeastern part of our county. And also, as businesses are starting to leave some of our business centers because people are working more and more remotely, to turn this into affordable housing.
And what specific, if not streets or lots, when you say southeast and east, what are you talking about there? Is that Encanto, Spring Valley, Rancho San Diego?
Yes, we desperately need housing in those areas. Specifically, Alpine is one of the areas that has been brought up as a possibility to build on. Here's what we know, though. Wildfires are a huge risk in Alpine. So again, we would lead sensibly with wildfire risk in mind to build. So right now, it's just unsustainable with people having to live in Tijuana or Southern Riverside or Riverside County in order to work in San Diego. We need to build smartly, protect our environment, and to keep people from leaving San Diego County.
Can you tell us a little bit about your philosophy on housing? You've mentioned single family homes a lot, and I remember when we talked in 22, you were critical of the vehicle miles traveled, not the tax at Sandag, but the county's
Right.
proposal to use that as a way to, kind of shape the housing situation in the county. So does your vision of housing entirely revolve around single family homes, primarily revolve around single family homes, involve, ADUs and condo complexes and high density building near transit? Or is it really on the fringes of the county, accounting for wildfire concerns, looking to put more housing there? I'm kind of curious holistically how you would approach housing in San Diego County.
We absolutely have to have a holistic approach. What my concern is with SB 10 is it really doesn't present opportunities for people to buy. And so I'd like to see, whether it's a condo or it's a townhouse or it's a single family home, that these kind of developments be available so that people can buy and get into the market. Because right now it's just unsustainable with people leaving. Regarding the VMT, yes, I do believe that it's overly restrictive. And I'm happy to say that at the forum on Saturday, one of my opponents also agreed that the VMT also needs to be loosened up just a little bit, because right now it's not allowing for any growth at all.
Which candidate was that?
I believe that was Monica Montgomery Stepp.
Do you think it needs to be loosened up a little bit or a lot or eliminated altogether as a policy issue? What would be your approach to that, the VMT?
I'm a big advocate for bringing all people together. I did not get the endorsement from the big developers here. One of my other opponents did. And that is because I went into that meeting and I sat at a table with the biggest developers in San Diego County, and I looked them in the eye and I said, we need to have environmentalists at the table. We need to have community input for developments. So that's just something to consider, that I'm willing to go into those environments and not just say what people want to hear. And I did not get the endorsement from the developers.
On housing, the fact is that in Britain and Japan, they're putting up millions of prefab units. Prefab units are so much stronger than they used to be. You can assemble them and put them up for $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. But it's a non-starter in California, on the left because of building trade unions, on the right because construction companies. They don't want to lose their salaries on the first part, and they don't want to lose their profits on the second part. So this is, to me, the most single frustrating thing in California about the housing debate, which ties into the homeless debate, is that there is a solution in plain sight that's being used by other first world countries. And yet we can't even get to a discussion of it in California because of the implacable opposition from the left and the right alike. So what does it say to the functionality of a state that it has a problem that's huge, but it won't take steps to use an obvious solution that's used in other nations to quickly provide housing? Earlier, you said it took 4 years sometimes to build housing. You could put up a prefab house in 16 hours.
I'm in full agreement with you. We need to think creatively to solve our housing crisis. And if prefab is the way to go, my only reservation would be about it is just to make sure that it is safe for earthquakes and that it meets standard building requirements. Other than that, I think we need to be really creative. And I think people are open to it now, where people may have looked down on projects like mobile homes, for example, and those kind of developments. What I really see of this generation is its willingness to live in a prefab home, and they call it tiny homes, right? And I think that it can be done right. I think it can actually be a good step in the right direction. And I'm in agreement with you. There's just people on both sides just being in entrenched positions and not being willing to come to the table. So I would be the kind of person that would want to bring people together.
Thank you.
You previously talked about the Sunrise Ranch project. The county it seems to be taking homelessness on more as a real issue, whereas before they thought of it not as a county issue, as a regional issue, as a city issue. Now it's thinking about it more as a mental and physical health issue as well, which suddenly becomes something in the county's purview. So I'm wondering, first of all, should the county have a shelter that it runs? And secondly, how do you get people to actually go to it once you build it? And I would include the Sunrise Ranch project. How would you encourage people to actually go to this place?
Absolutely. So part of my platform is shelter first with treatment. I do not believe that it is compassionate to allow people to sleep and die on our streets. Just last year, 588 homeless died on our streets. That's up sixfold from 2012. So we have a humanitarian crisis that's playing out on our streets, in our parks, on our beaches, and also in front of our businesses too. Just this past week, an owner of a hardware store in Hillcrest was physically assaulted by a homeless individual. Another story came out where an individual in Hillcrest was having lunch, I believe, with his husband, and he was attacked from behind by the throat. And then just 2 weeks before that, there was an individual who held the donut star captive. And of course, what we've seen is the Starbucks in Hillcrest, which has been there for almost 30 years, has had to leave because it can no longer guarantee the safety of its employees and its patrons. And so what I'm here to say is there is an intersection of homelessness, crime, mental illness, and severe addiction. So when it comes to our homeless population who are committing serious crime, I don't want them to go to jail. I want them to go to mandatory treatment. And so I believe that that is something that we could address right away. And you're absolutely correct. You can't make people go to a shelter. You can't make people get treatment. However, when it comes to people who are repeatedly committing serious crimes, we can mandate treatment for them. And I believe that that is the direction that we can go. And I think it would be the step in the right direction.
Amy, going back to transportation and climate, right now, even if there was some sort of program that helped people buy electric cars, there's not enough infrastructure in this city, like in the county rather, excuse me. Where would you see the growth? Where is the growth? Where is it needed the most? How would that look like to you to provide the infrastructure that is needed in order to to give the incentive to people to actually think about buying electric cars?
Well, I will be the first one to tell you, I cannot afford an electric car. It's just too expensive. And so most San Diegans are in that same boat. So the price of electric cars needs to come down. And I'm going to be the first to tell you, I don't have a solution for that. I'm not going to pretend that I have a solution for the car manufacturers to price electric cars competitively with gas-powered vehicles. I will say that I am in agreement with the state's goal of zero emission by 2035. So how can we get there? How can we get there to net zero by 2035? And it's a complex issue that's going to take a regional effort. It's going to take a countywide effort. It's going to require District 4, which is district that with my whole heart I hope to represent. There's multiple cities involved there. There's La Mesa, there's Lemon Grove, there's San Diego. We have to work with all of these cities. We have to work with the state and also the federal government to achieve these goals. But I just want to let you know I am in for these goals, and I think it's the direction we need to move.
Are there any positions that you've changed on in the last 9 months? I mean, candidates are people are always evolving, but I haven't gone down the list. It sounds like your entire platform is the same, and your positions are the same, but I just don't want to assume that. I figured I'd ask you. Is there anything that you think differently of now than you did when you were campaigning in 22 in terms of policy and approach to government?
I would say one of the things I'm most grateful for right now is just the opportunity to be in the community. When I ran against Nathan Fletcher, he wouldn't do a town hall. He wouldn't do a debate. And so my ideas and my platform really wasn't able to get out there. And so he spent a lot of money against me. Some of the texts that he sent to people, and he would call me a right-wing extremist, for example. I think, and it's up to you to decide what you've heard today from me, but I'm going to guess that that is not a description that you would put on me after you've heard my heart this time and also the last time I spoke to this board. So I think what has been wonderful is being out of the community, going to the forums, connecting with people, and it simply wasn't an option last time around.
Anyone else on the board have any other questions, follow-ups, or ground we didn't cover?
If you go back to the jail question briefly, could you talk about the jails? There's been a pushback because of the drugs getting in the jails. People have been suggesting that they ought to be searched. Everybody ought to be searched before they go in and out of the jail. Should the deputies and employees be searched going in and out of the jails?
100% everybody should be searched. Right now, it is a crisis. And the fact of the matter is, there have been some controversies where there have been some people who were personnel of the jails who were caught with drugs. So let's not pretend that this doesn't exist. It does exist. And just to give you an idea of some of my background, while I was a student at San Diego State, I was a student worker at Juvenile Hall. And what I did at Juvenile Hall, I did the same job description as the deputy probation officers. I will tell you right now, and back then, I would have no problem if I were entering a facility being searched. And I think that's the way that it should be. Everybody gets searched.
How would you assess Kelly Martinez and the job that she's doing as the new sheriff?
I did attend an event with Kelly Martinez probably about a month ago. I'm going to be really honest. I think a lot of the rank and file are still really disappointed in the leadership of the sheriff's department. And the situation in the jails, I think it's moving in the right direction, but it's not moving in the right direction quickly enough. Again, I cited 20 deaths last year, and we have 8 as of this year. That's really not much of an improvement. So again, at the peril of not trying to please people, I would say right now, our sheriff is going to be in her position for the next 5.5 years. And so we have a long way to go in this county.
Well, thank you for spending the past hour with us. Do you want to close any issues we didn't cover that you want to bring up or call our attention to or focus on? Take this for a closing statement.
No, moving forward here in San Diego, it doesn't matter if I'm talking to a Democrat, a Republican, a no party preference person. Everyone that I speak with is very, very concerned about the direction that San Diego has gone in the past 5 years. By every measurable metric, things have gotten worse in the eyes of San Diegans. At the end of the day, what people want is an affordable place to live, a safe place to live that they can enjoy with their loved ones. And right now, I know this board is going to have the option to endorse a candidate for supervisor. And so what I'm asking this board right now is, of all the candidates that you are going to speak with, are those candidates only going to repeat the same failed policies that have gotten us here? Or will they take us in a brighter, different direction with actual policies and a platform that's going to make a difference here? So I want to thank the board very much for your time. And I just look forward to a better San Diego. And that is how I operate. I veer towards hope and not cynicism. I think San Diego is going to get better. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. I appreciate your help today.